You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hi, and welcome to Sustainably Geeky, episode 16. I'm Jennifer, and I am joined tonight by Jen.
Hello, guys.
And we have a special guest, Dr. Lynette Reed. Dr. Reed is an expert with over 25 years of experience in the area of community building. She's a writer, facilitator, and mentor for topics of discussion, including sustainability, critical thinking skills, binary thinking in business, corporate culture, and engagement. So we thought it would be fun to talk to her today about a few of those things and find out kind of how she blends all that together and how we can use some of those skills in helping people become more conscious of the environment and to live a more sustainable lifestyle. So Dr. Reed, would you like to, tell us how you kind of got into this field and what your passion for sustainability started with?
Sure, yeah. I actually kind of started, I decided to go back and get my doctorate, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to get it in, so I was kind of looking around. And I found this really interesting field called Sustainability, Interreligious Dialogue, and Spirituality. And it's basically like a world peace degree. I don't know. That's what we've always called it. Because what my part in it, whenever I was doing my research for it, basically was talking about is how do you connect yourself, your inner self, to other people and the world around you. And so when I look at sustainability, I look at it from the broader perspective of how do you create an environment for yourself internally and create an environment around you that helps you to live a life more interconnected. And to me, that's what sustainability is all about, is how do we care for those things around us. And so that's kind of how I came into it. So it can be anything from sustainability related to resilience, or sustainability related to the environment or your home or culture or any of those types of things.
Awesome. And so that was a very long list of things that you help facilitate. Tell us how, I guess, they work together, and how you have a unique perspective because you kind of have that holistic view.
Yeah, well, for me, that's the beautiful thing about sustainability is it's so personal to your own picture of the world and what you're trying to accomplish. And so, if I say the word sustainability to some people, they automatically think like LEED certification, or they might think of, recycling, or, just there's hundreds and hundreds of ways that you can create an environment that gives you that sustainable lifestyle, where you're kind of making the world a quote unquote a better place to live. You're trying to be caring to the earth, you're trying to be caring to yourself. And so to me, that's the beautiful thing, is you can craft whatever you want it to look like for your own life and for your own environment. And all of them are so different because, people are different, the environments are different. And so whenever you have one person doing that and passionate and following their kind of desire, and then you have another person who's following their desire, and all of a sudden you start connecting the dots on all of these different people who are doing these amazing sustainable things, then that's how you kind of build that culture. And it can be frustrating if you live in an environment where nobody's doing anything. It's kind of more of a destructive environment. And so to me, that gets into that whole question of how do you create something around you, even if it's a more destructive environment you're living in. So that's kind of my thought on how to do that. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think a lot of us feel like we live in that destructive environment, whether it's locally or on a national level. I think there's a lot of hopelessness, especially when you hear about how bad things are getting and how we're nearing that point of no return where, just a couple of degrees Celsius and we're going to be basically damning the planet and our ability to live on it for all eternity, according to the science. So
exactly,
how do you, stay hopeful and keep, people engaged when that stuff is happening and they do feel that way?
What I normally do whenever I'm working with somebody who's trying to exact change that way is I say, don't try to eat the whole elephant. If you start looking at it too big, it becomes so overwhelming that it's just kind of discouraging feeling. And so to me, if somebody really is trying to make a change in something, I would say to start with, pick a few things or a couple of goals that you can do that are really manageable and work on those first. And then once those are kind of in place, then try to do other little goals. And I think to me, the biggest challenge is that if you can't get other people to do it, then you have to be the model and grow it kind of from within yourself out. You know what I mean? And sometimes you're going to be in an environment where people aren't interested or they don't want to do it. And so you may have to be very creative, or you may have to go find, funding that helps you to do what you want to do, and just kind of not let yourself get discouraged about the fact that you can't change other people, but you can do it for yourself and know that you're the one who's really making a change that's important for you, because sometimes I think if you think in terms of, oh gosh, I can't get all these people to come my way, then you're going to start to feel discouraged. Where if you say, okay, if I do this, and this year, I'm going to feel like these are manageable goals that I can actually achieve, and I've actually done something for the universe. And that's a much nicer feeling at the end of the year than thinking, oh gosh, I haven't touched anybody in this. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really internal perspective that makes you more sustainable. It makes you more resilient when you can do those types of things. So that's kind of my backward way of looking at it.
I was going to try to segue into how you write articles for different companies. And one of your articles was about self-awareness in the workplace. And since we're kind of on that topic of just focusing on you sometimes when you can't always change other people, I guess my question is it just finding something tangible, like creating an actual project, like a community garden or something to that effect, so it makes you feel better, like you have something that you can see, touch, smell? So
Yeah.
it's not the intangible things that maybe can become discouraging over time if you feel like you haven't made like progress. Or I guess my question really is what have you seen that's worked in that regard?
Well, it's really interesting because you said a bunch of words at the beginning, binary thinking, critical thinking, sustainability, and to me, they're all really interconnected. And so when you're talking about self-awareness, for instance, okay, you can have different layers of it. And I think, when you're talking about binary thinking, you're talking about looking at things from an either or perspective. It's either good or it's bad or it's wrong or it's right or it's this or it's that. And if you think about our world, we really are a very gray society when it comes to all the options that are available. So if you're thinking to yourself in your mind, oh my gosh, if I don't get this recycle program started at work, I'm a failure. How's that going to make you feel? If you don't get it to go, you're going to feel pretty bad, right? But if you say, okay, my goal is I want to attempt to start a recycle program by going out and buying the bins and making sure that I put signs on them to tell people how to do it and sending out emails to people so that they know that that's available and making sure that the bins are taken care of. Those are very definable goals that really help you to feel much better, because if you do those things, you've got very physical, tangible things you can do that are going to help you feel like you've done something. And then even if nobody uses the bins, at least you can say to yourself, hey, I did my part. And that's the part that I need to start with. That doesn't mean that that's where I'm going to end. But to me, that's what self-awareness has to do with, is being able to look outside of what you want it to look like and look at the bigger, broader picture of how can I model for people ways that they can do it so that they can really feel good about themselves.
Yeah, I think from a lot of the research I've done, because a lot of what I've been trying to do in the sustainability field for my career is, how do you get people to that action state? So I had to like Google search everything I could to try to figure out like what is the key to success in all of this. And a lot of things that kept popping up was social proofing, which really is just like things that you see on Facebook or social media in general or television or you hear on the radio or you just see social norms in your community. So when you see someone recycling and they are acknowledged or recognized for doing that action, it perpetuates this feeling of, oh, this is our culture now and we do this and that's an acceptable behavior. And that's what really kind of flips the switch for some people. And then there's
recycling's cool.
Yeah.
You're not cool if you don't recycle.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went back and forth a lot with it because there are times where, you know, some sort of nice version of public shaming actually is very effective. So, you know, we kind of try to find that balance. You know, it's almost like you have to do a little bit of both, you know, a little bit of the carrot and a little bit of the stick so that there are repercussions like ticketing people for not recycling properly and putting the wrong thing in the bin. But there's also incentive programs so the people that are doing the right thing are paying less for trash because they have a smaller size bin or, you know, those types of things. And that's just for recycling. But for all things sustainable, it's kind of this magic recipe that you have to figure out within your own community because everyone's surroundings are different and their background is different. And yeah, and a lot of it too is if you're able to do like PowerPoint presentations, you always want to show pictures of kids and just be like, this is why we're doing this.
That's right. Let's remember.
Cute little babies like always get to people's heartstrings.
Oh
you know?
yeah.
So, and that's where we can all kind of agree on some sort of common level. Like, don't make this a Republican versus Democrat type of discussion. This is about the future of the human population and in general, like all animals and plants that live on Earth.
Health and safety and yeah,
exactly.
So we try to tend to like, you know, even if you have those people in the crowd that you can see them like stealing like from their ears because you mentioned the word climate change, you know, you can still show pictures of cute little babies and that'll get them to like understand like, oh, I do have really cute grandbabies and I do want them to have polar bears in their lifetime. So you know, so those are the things that I have found that have helped. So if there's anyone listening or watching, you know, those types of strategies seem to have been successful. And feel free to share your ideas with us as well.
Yeah. And that would be, to me, that'd be the great thing is the more people that will share the things that they've done successfully and kind of put them all in a place where everybody can see them. That I think that's a great idea for having people be able to find coalitions like that. And what you're talking about with politicians, I think to me that's a really big thing too, because if you've got a strong contingency of people, there's nothing that says that you don't go and try to work with your politicians. And to me, the thing I have found a lot is a lot of people ask the question, what's in it for me? So try to find win-wins for people.
Life.
You can find,
you want to live.
Yeah. But I mean, I hate to say this, but human beings tend to be more crisis management people, you know, and I think that's where you're going to have the challenge with people is because until it's an absolute crisis that they can see on their front doorstep, a lot of people do not see that. And I think that's the challenge for people who have that awareness and that understanding of how we connect with the universe. So people like you are going to feel very frustrated because the people who don't want to see that or can't see that for some reason are going to be struggling to find that. And so you're right. That's the magic key. If we could find a way to show people something they've never seen before and help them to understand, you know, their connection to it and help them to see the value of it, that's the thing that could be the magic key for not only sustainability, but for politics, for pretty much everything that we, you know, have conflict with. Because right now people just, you know, if you look on Facebook, you see it all the time. You know, it's either I have an opinion. If you don't agree with my opinion, you're wrong. And they just fight about it instead of saying, hey, how can we build a coalition here? You know, or how can we band together and make this work? And throw in a couple of pictures of the cute little kids, grandkids and some puppies, because that's part of it, and say, okay, this is what we're working for. We want cute little kids and puppies to have a place to play, 50 years from now. You know what I mean? So how do we do that? What can we do as a group of people? And I think that's why your podcast is so important, is because you get people talking about it and sharing their opinions about what they do and how they do it. And pretty soon you start to build those networks that will help people to see more, how people can draw each other together and have value in it and stuff like that.
Well, I would imagine that a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are already, somewhat environmentally conscious folks. So, we're really trying to break down stereotypes in our culture as much as possible with this particular episode in this podcast, because we can be so piped into these tree huggers that eat crunchy granola and don't shave their armpits and just scream and yell at people because we can't get them to pay attention to the problem that we're in. So I guess I just wanted to share all, the three of us that are on this call, if there's, any ideas that you guys have for finding common ground, meeting people in the middle, so that if you are confronted with some sort of aggressive conversation with someone that doesn't agree with you, how is the best approach to handle it so that you can, end on somewhat of a good term with them and maybe get them to start thinking in a different way and not just be like, that tree hugger, it doesn't
because sometimes that can, that can be a challenge, because, to me, the way I always think of it is, this is a thing I always use as an example, is if you go into a restaurant and it's a certain kind of restaurant and you are kind of, you want something that's not on the menu, and you're just kind of pushy about it, and you're kind of, I want it my way, give it to me, people aren't going to want to serve you as much, and they're not going to want to work with you. Whereas if you say to them, hey, this is what I'd really like, is there any way I can get it? And maybe we can, work together to do it. And I see that a lot because, on a personal note, I have a gluten allergy. And so I've had one for many years. And, when it first came out, it was something that you couldn't get anywhere. I mean, now it's gotten much better, but I found very much so that if I went in and just kind of demanded something, I wasn't going to pretty much get it. But if I went in and asked and said, hey, can you work with me on this? They were much more willing to. And, that goes into the whole thing about conflict resolution. How do we, as people who have passionate opinions about things, take those opinions and turn them into something that is a win-win, can draw people in with us and resolve conflicts in a way that when people leave, they're like, wow, that was a really wonderful exchange. I really enjoyed that. Nobody was, rude or pushy. And we really kind of got together and had a good discussion about it. And, you can ask them, you can say, hey, explain to me why it is that you're not interested in sustainability. Why is it that you don't seem to really care about that? Explain to me why that is, and try to gain some understanding, because a lot of times it's just that they don't have the knowledge of it. If you weren't raised around that, or if you've never had access to that, then that's a much different thing. And people, I love it. There's a couple of places I've been where they have projects where, it's just, oh my gosh, the lifestyle there is so dangerous and broken. And you drive by and somebody has planted a community garden, and it's like this bright little spot in this dark place, you know what I mean? And I think, wow, how do we, as people who really care about stuff like that, plant these little seeds and these little things in places so that people who drive by can see them and maybe appreciate them? You know what I mean? That's the question. Either that, or I hate to say it, your other option is to just move somewhere everybody believes like you do and live there.
Well,
I know sometimes, well, I'll just move, someplace where, I can think, I've got a few in my mind, but I won't say them, a couple of little states that are much more, sustainable about things.
Not Texas.
Yeah. So,
well, I do know that a lot of us chose to live in Texas and pursue these initiatives in Texas because they need it here.
Yeah.
And or maybe we're just gluttons for punishment. I don't know. But yeah, okay. I mean, I generally know that you should just be a nice person and try to meet people where they're at and not try to force them into anything.
Yeah.
But there really have been some very contentious interactions that I've had with individuals, and
Oh, yeah.
you know, and I usually shut down. Like, I'm just so like shocked that they are behaving in that way that I can't even this is how I've been my whole life. Like, I can't just be like, well, blah 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 blah, and just fight back at them. I'm just like, well, okay, pump the brakes. Like,
Yeah.
That happened to me at a presentation. I had a heckler in the audience that got up and left because he didn't like what I was saying about, it was a sustainability talk, but I started off telling, what climate change is, et cetera. And he started
They didn't want to hear
arguing.
it.
And his argument actually wasn't climate change specifically. He started lashing out when I was talking about the fact that we're running out of land, like usable land. And he said, well, we use less than 1% in this, planet, and that's just a lie. And we have plenty of land, and we're not going to run out anytime soon. And I was like,
it could happen. It really could. Yeah. I've actually had people get it right in my face and literally point their finger in my face and yell at me. And, you just have to kind of say, this person is obviously very threatened by what I am saying for whatever reason. And a lot of times my theory is that anytime you challenge somebody's belief system that is against what you believe, that you're talking about a fear-driven response. And so you've got that fight or flight response. And so when somebody gets really aggressive like that, if they feel somehow like you're devaluing them as a person because you don't agree with them, then they're going to get very hostile because they want to believe that they're tying their value as a person to their belief in no sustainability or whatever their belief is. And so, to me, I think that's a factor that you always want to take into consideration when somebody gets really hostile like that. Is, to me, I'm wondering what they're fearful of. What's making them afraid.
That's being modeled like right now in front of us with Greta Thunberg and the way that she's being treated by politicians and, just people in general who are outright bullying her and just saying these awful things. She's 16 years old, and obviously they're scared and they feel threatened by this 16-year-old girl who is speaking more eloquently and, knows more about this stuff than they do and has a grasp of the science in a way that they just can't or won't accept. And it's really unfortunate, but luckily she doesn't seem to, care, which is good for her. She's doing the right thing.
Which may show you that she does have a very strong sense of her own self-awareness and her own connection to the universe, because she doesn't have to prove it to anybody. She's got a strong core self that says, hey, I'm valuable. My belief system's valid for me, and I'm going to share it with people. And hopefully over time, it will change the way people do things. And I mean, you see it a lot. People are inventing things all the time that are very sustainable types of things. I wish I had a link for you, but I know there's one that I saw recently that I just thought was really interesting, was where they had built this machine that literally went in and kind of, how a filter works for an air conditioner. Well, this filter works for the ocean. And basically, I don't know exactly the mechanics of it, but it goes in and it actually filters, stuff out of the water. And so it's starting maybe to clean up. And if they can make them big enough, maybe, or do something like that.
It's a giant oyster that
goes
around.
That's right, goes around and
filtering the water.
Exactly.
Are you talking about the machine that taking all the plastics and trash out of the ocean?
Does the
yeah. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know the name of it. I was going to look it up real quick, but I recently saw an article on that, and I just thought, wow, if we could get more and more people to be innovative and find ways to do that. I mean, imagine what that would look like if people said, okay, here's a bunch of engineers who want to clean up our ocean. Let's go ahead and do that, or get funding. That's the big thing, is if you can find some people who have money that they want to do philanthropically, that you can start having them help come up with innovations and things like that will not necessarily tell people how it's getting done, but show them, because that's where you're really going to get that impact. Is if you look on Facebook, think about what are people their attention drawn to on Facebook. They see something that's interesting to them and they watch it. Normally it's like kittens or puppies or somebody doing something silly, but if you could find a way to maneuver or move Facebook posts to things like, here's all the really interesting, innovative things that are coming out, and here's a video showing how they work, and then get these people who are doing these innovations together and put them together and say, okay, now let's see if we can be innovative with that. Because with artificial intelligence and with technology the way it is, imagine what that could look like if you put artificial intelligence and technology into cleaning up the earth, or because you can do air quality, you could do water quality, you could do sustainable homes, really anything. I mean, I think, I can't remember what the name of the person was, but somebody was even building like small 3D homes for people, just very simple structure so that people don't have to be homeless or things like that.
Are you talking about like the 3D printing?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean,
That's pretty cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's wide open. We just have to, get that innovation out there, and find ways to connect the people together and strengthen it in numbers.
And I think you're seeing more and more of it, not just from like developing new technologies, but our last show was actually about the creative reuse movement and how there's been this big surge of people just trying to find new ways to use things and invent, something out of something old. And I think that's great that people are trying to divert things from the landfill and trying to make things last longer. It's obviously not as widespread as it needs to be, but it's a slow growing thing. And I think, like Jen said, it's getting that like social weight to it, to where it's going to be like, oh, you bought that new? Well, I made this from this weird thing I found for 10 cents at a yard sale, and
right, yeah,
maybe we'll get that peer pressure going on that stuff too.
Yeah, and I think people, they get excited whenever it's something that it has that kind of it factor to it, and I think that's the big challenge, is finding that it factor for it. In fact, I'm in Austin right now, and I haven't talked to anybody recently, but about, and actually I think, Jennifer, this was at one of your meetings. They had the guy who was with the Austin, the trash pickup sanitation department. This was years ago, but they had talked about doing compostable trash, and so they were having all the restaurants get together, and instead of throwing trash away, they were going to compost it all, and they were figuring out a way to do that at the city level. And so, maybe trying to work with some of your city organizations to say, how can we help you make this happen?
Maybe. You're talking about like the food waste composting?
Yeah. Do you remember that? Yeah, that was a meeting I went to at your place actually that one time. And he was talking about they were going to try to do that.
Austin's been doing it. They're pretty good at composting. And I'm in San Antonio now, and they have curbside pickup for composting as well. So Texas is on its way, guys.
That's right. By gosh, we'll just keep moving forward.
Slowly but surely.
It is tough sometimes when you're just in the day-to-day grind and you're not seeing progress at the level that you'd like. But then if I do look back, like, I don't know, 13 years ago when I first got out of college and started working, I mean, things are pretty different.
They're dragging right along, aren't they?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously it's not happening, quick enough, but things are getting there slowly. So
celebrate the little things.
I can feel good about those things,
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
So I guess back to like self-awareness, there is a whole like genre of something called environmental psychology. So I don't know if either of you are well versed in it, but I briefly kind of just did some reading on it. But there's a certain way that like the brain reacts to certain triggers. And so in the environmental arena, people can often, if you are aware of what you're saying and how you're saying it, almost like if you're talking to a therapist, like they know how to appropriately respond.
Yes.
There's a whole field for that, for environmental issues. And so that's kind of where I was interested in learning more about it is, you know, as an environmentalist and people that are listening that are into this type of stuff, there's a whole like brainwashing that strategy that is available, and it's very nonchalant. Like if you talk to people, you know, if you talk to a therapist or a counselor or whoever, like they know how to read body language, they know how to understand, you know, people's different perspectives and ask the right questions, and you can get people to just like flip the switch maybe. I don't know if this is the key to the problem, but I think I'm going to definitely try to learn more of like how to do that.
There's actually a great TV show, and it's been off the air for a long time, and I think there were only 3 seasons. It was called Lie to Me. Did you ever see that one? It's about this guy who can read your body language and the context of what you're saying, and figure out who's lying and who's not. And he's a consultant, so he can pretty much with about 100% accuracy tell whether or not you're lying or what you're what you're doing by looking at your body language and all. And so when you're talking about that environmental psychology, it popped in my mind that, you know, when you're talking about a narrative for your story, there's if you're telling a story, you can tell it 100 different ways. You know, John was a jerk and everybody at work hated him. Or, you know, you could say, here's another narrative. John didn't get his work done, and so therefore people were becoming frustrated with the fact that he wasn't doing his job. You know, same story, but can you hear contextually kind of the different thing?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a little bit about what you're talking about is if you're trying to talk to somebody in a way that shares with them the best possible scenario or context that will make them feel comfortable, you can change it depending on who the audience is. So if you have somebody who's really angry and threatened by what you're saying, you might word it differently than somebody, say, like if you were talking to each other or to somebody else who was already very sustainably approachable. You could use a whole different vocabulary, a different context, a different body language with each of them to make them feel better, you know, or make them feel more connected to the story you're telling, you know, and how do you include them in, you know, like you could say to somebody, all right, I see you're upset, but what are you so upset about? Explain to me how you feel about that. And then that gives you kind of that you're opening up a space then where if they tell you, well, you know, my parents used to make me recycle and I hated doing it because it always had to happen on Saturday morning, because you don't know what their story is. There may be a reason why they feel so threatened by that. And if you open up that space and say, okay, explain to me, why don't you like recycling? Explain it to me. What's going on there? Then you can do a better narrative with them because you know where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think in general, it's human nature to want to be heard. So if you're just willing to listen, sometimes they'll run out of things to say, and then eventually you can kind of jump in there and help, you know, move them in a different direction, perhaps. But it reminds me of when I was trying to create, like, even simple things like signage. Like, there's so much psychology behind marketing. Like, I don't have a lot of schooling and marketing, but there's colors and, you know, the shapes that they make that catches your eye. And so just even trying to make like a simple pamphlet of like, this is what needs to be recycled and this is what doesn't need to be recycled. Like there's so many different little flyers, and how you put it together either attracts someone's eye to it and it entices them to read it and look at it and then do the behavior. Like I've even been to Whole Foods where they'll have like the actual items themselves, like behind a little glass display case showing like this is what goes in this bin, or, you know, so it's just a lot of, like, white space is very important as well. So anyways, that's just signage. Like, there's a whole other thing about like prompting people. Like, there's certain ways of getting people to understand like this is the acceptable behavior, and putting signs up that just shows, you know, this is what we do here. Because a lot of us spend the majority of our lives at work for the most part. So if you can influence your own workspace, that alone can be your little win for yourself. If you can't change, you know, like you can at least make the small little changes in your own home and in your office space at least.
Yeah, and you can make, you know, long-term and short-term goals. Say, you know, some of the smaller goals you do year to year are ones that are going to be definite wins, so you don't get frustrated. You know, I'm going to keep my recycle bin emptied. You know, that's a nice little win. That if you're really, you know, at the kind of the basic level of sustainability, that's a pretty easy one. But then you can say, okay, my 5-year plan is to get a program in place that brings 100 new people into doing this sustainable project, whatever it is. And then going out and figuring how to use that psychology and that context and how you word things and how you talk to people to get them, that 100 people in. And it takes the challenge with that is it takes a lot more time than saying, hey, just get in here and do it, you know, because you do have to take time to listen, and you do have to, you know, try to draw them in by, you know, asking them. Because think about it, if somebody listens to you and listens to how you feel about it, are you going to be more inclined or less inclined to do something with them or to participate in something with them, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's a great, environmental psychology would be a very interesting area. You need to get a couple of environmental psychologists on the podcast to.
I know. I was looking up names when I was doing all my research. I was like, to call these people. But like a lot of them get hired, like as a career. Like these environmental psychologists are hired for like zoos to figure out how to do the educational displays that you read as you're walking through the zoo and stuff like that. It's
I dabble in it, but I'm not an expert, but I do like to dabble in it because I do think it is very important how you talk to people and the environment around you, because you can feel it. I mean, think about when you walk into Whole Foods versus another grocery store that's not, you know, think about that. It feels different, doesn't it? It's got a different, even though it's a grocery store with food and cash registers and cashiers, it's got a different feel to it, you know, and that's kind of, I think that whole environmental psychology thing is how do you make something feel more sustainable? You know, you go to parking lots and one parking lot has trees, big trees growing with shade and plants and flowers, and the other one's just asphalt. Which one are people automatically going to be, you know, even unconsciously drawn to, you know? So, you know, trying to work on little things like that.
There's been some scientific studies that have shown, you know, humans are obviously attracted to nature. And so there's this whole new push for, it's called biophilic design for the interior of spaces. And it's really just bringing the outdoors in. So having, you know, having a window, having natural light, having a view of trees outside your window, and then bringing plants into your space. So you'll see a lot of like green roofs outside. Well, now they're doing like living walls inside. And so like I just got a new office a couple of weeks ago, and so I'm like bringing plants like almost every day, and everyone's just like, what is this chick doing? And I'm like, all right, come and sit in my space and see how you feel. Versus this one that has no plants and no windows. Like, you know, you feel different. And so that could be part of, you know, the self-care as an environmentalist. We have to take care of ourselves sometimes too. And so just finding those things that do make you feel good and happy. Because
you don't want to get discouraged. And I love that because actually, you know, we were looking at venues this past week, and one of the venues is a place in Austin, because that's why I'm here, is called Bar Mansion. And they actually have a building where the vines outside started to grow on the side of the building. And instead of cutting them down and getting rid of them, they've incorporated them into the wall. And so the plant is actually, the vines are actually growing inside the building now and creating a green wall. And they have to trim it back about twice a year, but it's stunning because instead of just having a plain, construction wall, they have a wall of vines that kind of cover the inside and outside of the building. And
Wow.
aesthetically, when you look at it, it's like, oh, wow. You don't think, oh, my gosh, there's a bunch of weeds, growing on this house. You're thinking, gosh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, they do create cleaner air, so it's also.
See, there you go. Yeah. We actually, as sustainable people, joked about that. We said there was going to be much more good air in the building. So,
Yeah.
So that's a positive. Yeah.
So I want to jump back to when we were talking about kind of finding common ground with people and meeting them where they're at. I got to hear Katharine Hayhoe speak a few years ago, and she's kind of a world-renowned climate scientist at Texas Tech, and she's very well known for being both a climate scientist and an evangelical Christian, and kind of marrying those two worlds that a lot of times people see as diametrically opposed. And she is very good at just telling stories and relating to people. And so one of the big takeaways from her talk and everything she puts out really is like you said, find common ground with people, find what it is that they care about. So maybe for you, sustainability and climate change means, the downfall of humanity, and you're looking at it from this perspective. But for someone else, it may just be they like to hunt or they like to fish and hike. So maybe that's what you connect with them over. And instead of preaching the doom and gloom of the world's ending, you say, well, if we don't fix this, we're not going to have clean water for you to fish in or drink, or, pristine landscapes for you to go hiking in, camping. And figuring out, what it is that makes them tick, because there's got to be something, whether it's, the activities they enjoy, or like Jen said, they have kids and they care about their health and their ability to enjoy nature, or, something else that you hadn't even thought of. But it is interesting once you start talking to people to figure out what it is that is important to them and how you can use that,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's unlikely.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge I have seen in all the years I've been doing this is that most people, generally speaking, now this is just generally speaking, don't get passionate or involved in something until it has directly affected them. So if you're a fisher, well, you're not going to care if a lake, 20 miles from you that you never go to is polluted. But boy, if your lake gets polluted and you can't fish there anymore, I mean, how many fishermen do you think are going to come out and raise a ruckus about that? Or if they say, okay, air quality is so bad, everybody has to wear masks and you can't go outside for a week. Now, are people going to be more reaction? Yes, because it's impacting how they live their daily lives. You see that with water shortages. I mean, think about how people get whenever there's a water shortage. There's been some droughts lately. I think Atlanta had a really bad one a couple of years ago where they almost ran out of water, or you have times when there's a natural disaster where there's no water around, people change. And so to me, I think the biggest challenge is how do you get people to care before it has to impact their own personal daily living experience.
Yeah.
Because most people don't think in terms of, oh my gosh, 5 years from now, something bad might happen. They're thinking, gosh, how do I get food on the table and get my kids to soccer and get to work, get, a house, I want a nice, comfortable, safe house to live in. And so if those are the things you're really thinking about, whether or not something's sustainable or not may take a second kind of spot in your life, because it's not a dramatic thing right there. So how do you make them see, well, if we can do this now, then maybe we will have maintenance instead of crisis. That's what we're struggling for.
I've learned over the years, much to my frustration at times, that a lot of people, it just doesn't come naturally to them to be concerned about others, or how, like you said, how things affect people that in other places that may not directly affect them, but just caring because other people are suffering. And that's frustrating for me, because I, tend to just be a bleeding heart. Like, I will cry at the slightest little thing that I hear about happening, injustice in the world, and a lot of people just aren't like that. And so it's taken a lot of time for me to, understand that and kind of accept that, okay, other people have other ways of processing things, and how do we get them to kind of care when it doesn't directly impact their lives?
Yeah,
'Cause we're all connected, we're
yeah,
all
exactly. We are,
humans.
yeah. And in fact, there's a thing called the butterfly effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically what it says is, if there's a weather, something that happens in the weather in one part of the country, it impacts some, like the butterflies in Mexico. You know what I mean? So every little thing that happens is interconnected. And if you think about it from an atomic level, it's not like there's a little section of molecules over here and a little section of molecules over here. All the molecules in the world are kind of bumping up against each other and moving around, and things are shifting back and forth. So even on a molecular level, we're all interconnected. It's just, like I said, how do you show people who don't see that as part of their daily lifestyle? Yeah.
And I think
that's a challenge.
I think an important distinction to make also is like you said earlier, a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And I have to remember that I was one of those people, growing up. I mean, we recycled and we did stuff, but I didn't realize, plastics and disposables were as terrible as they are. I remember even a few years ago at work, I would just, use plastic flatware and throw away cups and styrofoam plates. And now the thought of me doing that, I would just like hide my head in shame. But I mean, I've learned a lot in those years, and you teach yourself things, and you go out and you actively keep trying to learn and improve yourself. And I think in going through that and knowing that not everyone's gone through, that same process or cares to learn about those things, that kind of changes your perspective too when you're trying to talk to people, just realizing that, hey, they haven't gotten there yet, or they're not even aware that what they're doing is harmful.
Yeah, and if you're like a business owner, how great would it be if you said to your employees, okay, we're all taking Friday afternoon off, and we're going down to this area, and we're going to clean the the land, or we're going to do a water quality thing, or we're going to do something that's a life lesson, but it's also something that's already good for the environment, volunteerism, that kind of helps them see, oh, okay, there really are other things that I can do that are very simple things that'll help. And I think businesses could play a huge role in that if they do. And there's a lot of them that do. I mean, it's not unheard of to have companies that say, yeah, let's do volunteer time and go do something to make a difference in the world, whether it be sustainability from a environmental perspective, from a interpersonal perspective, or something like that. And when you're talking about the things that make you go, where you have to think twice, is for me the big one was I saw this video once of the plastic bags in the ocean, and how they throw the plastic bags, and it gets the animals get stuck in them and all. And I don't know why, but I just normally it makes me sad that I'm not like kind of that impacted to the level where now I cannot throw away a plastic bag. I actually have to make sure they're all recycled in the house. And so if somebody in the family puts one of the plastic bags in the bin, I'll kind of pull it out and put it in my little recycle bin and take it to one of the plastic bag recycle places, because my visual that makes me not want to, that kind of it's the impetus for me is that picture of the animals getting stuck in it. And so that's my small victory part that I do on a regular basis.
So this is bringing up a topic for me about like burnout, because there is a certain point where you can get frustrated and you're just like, screw this, I give up.
Nobody's listening.
So I do have to constantly remind myself of, look at the things that have been accomplished. So if this particular topic or issue is, not going to work out, just find your champions and work with them. And sometimes it is okay to like throw in the towel and move on, because you don't want to completely burn yourself out, I guess is what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
yeah. Go for the
Yeah.
small victories. Yeah, yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, you were talking earlier about Christian or religious views. Actually, one of the things I love is there's a pastor named Barbara Brown Taylor who somebody asked her once. I think if how she didn't get burnout in her church because there's so many people who were always complaining about how something was being done or something like that. It's always stuck with me what she said is she says, you can't control all the people in the church, but what you do is you find the people in the church who are the light, the ones who are just putting their head down, getting their work done, and then you band them together, and then you start building your coalitions around these people. And, even though hers was from a religious context, you could very much put it for any context, your business, sustainability, any of those things is there are people that, that you work with or people that kind of lift you up and you spend time with them, make it a point every week, to spend some time nurturing yourself because, I think we forget sometimes when we do the environmental sustainability that it's also important to do the self-sustainability or the interpersonal sustainability because those things are so integrated. One impacts the other, and so if you're just focusing on the environmental one and you forget the other two, sometimes you are going to find that breakdown because you're not giving yourself resiliency and sustainability, or you're not giving the people around you that. You know what I'm saying? So find ways to kind of make a cycle where when you feel like the environmental part's getting you down, go to the to the self one. Yeah, go do something just really nice. Walk in the woods.
I need to go
take a
to
deep
nature.
breath. Yeah, climb a mountain.
I have to find myself time to just walk in the park and enjoy the trees.
Yeah.
And go for a swim and go, do some yoga to find my inner happiness.
Yeah, go pick up recycled cans that are laying around somewhere, or it's like a little victory, your own little personal crusade,
And another thing that I've been working on recently is creating expectations, and then your own perceptions of reality may not be based in anything real. So just because I send an email out to the entire organization and only one person responds that they're interested in being a part of my sustainability work group, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's
it's
only
very
one person.
specific.
Yeah, there's
She's
only
not
one.
holding any grudges.
That's right. Just that one person. Yeah.
Well, because today at work they were like, it's been year end, and I really needed to get to that. Let's do this. And so meanwhile, this whole time I've been thinking oh my gosh, only one person out of 100 wants to work with me on this, But it's just people have their own stuff going on, and they might not be able to do it right in that moment and respond right in that time. So again, it's just be patient, find your champions, work with the one person,
get
things going, and then you create that social proofing, social norms and within your organization, and eventually people will be like, oh, that is pretty cool. They're having fun. I want to be a part of that. They got recognized on stage and got an award because they took the initiative or that. So anyways, I do that a lot in general for a lot of stuff. I'll make assumptions that someone's thinking something, and I really have no clue that that's what they're thinking. I'm just assuming it. So anyways, that's just another thing of being just a better person or a better environmentalist is just know that the things you tell yourself are not necessarily real.
Yeah. Actually, that's a great segue. I do a lot of work with conflict resolution and stuff like that. And whenever I was doing my doctorate many years ago, I actually was doing research, and I found there's actually these three things. If people are saying, okay, I want to learn critical thinking skills, I want to learn self-awareness, things like that. Well, if you're wanting to kind of do a sustainability part that's for your personal self, there's actually three things that you can do. And for some people, they're very easy and they come naturally, but some people it's very difficult because they weren't taught it and it wasn't a part of their culture. But you were talking about expectations and reality. The third one in that is to align your expectations with reality. because, there sometimes the reason we get very frustrated is because our beliefs or our expectations are very different than what the reality of the situation is. And so we start to feel frustrated. And so what I tell people a lot of times if I'm working on self-sustainability is that if you start to feel frustrated or upset or mad about something, that the chances are very high that your expectations are not matching the reality of the situation. And assumptions are not a good thing to have. You should always get the facts, because when you don't, you're exactly right. That's where you make situations possibly worse. In fact, the best story I have about this is a true story, is I was asked to come in and work with this company, and there were two people that were fighting. And I mean, it had gotten so bad. It was a small company that they had divided the business, and half the people were on one side, half the people were other. Nobody was talking. It had caused a horrible situation in the company. So I went in and I was talking to the two people who were at the core of this. And to make a long story short, what ended up being the starting point of it was they were in a meeting together. And one of them, whenever they were sitting across the table from each other in this meeting, and one of them just looked across the room, and they happened to be one of those people that when they were thinking, they scowled. They had kind of that scowly face when they were thinking, and they were looking across at the other side of the table, just, looking at the wall. And the other person thought that they were staring at them. And these are people that used to like go have lunch together and were, they were colleagues. And the one on the other side thought, well, gosh, what's he mad at me about? He's sitting over there scowling at me while we're having this meeting. And he says, well, forget that. If he's going to act like that with me, I'm just going to stop, I'm going to just avoid him. So he started avoiding him. So the other guy was like, well, gosh, if this guy is going to keep avoiding me, then I don't want to be around him. And it just kind of snowballed from this belief that somebody was mad at somebody. And so it was so funny, because it was like magic, because whenever at the very end, when I sat them down and said, okay, this is what happened, they were like, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay, so that makes sense. And then they were fine. It was like, and so I think you're right. I think that's one thing when you're doing anything environmentally sustainable, is that goes back to that whole listening thing, is make sure you know what the real story is, because if you're assuming there's a reason why that person either doesn't care or doesn't know, it may be that your assumption of what that person is thinking is not correct. And so therefore you're not going to know how to do the psychology to get them to the right place,
It is crazy to me that there's so much behind the environmental field that revolves around proper communication skills.
Yeah.
And it could just be body language alone, like you're saying, like a face expression alone. When you aren't confronted with that, all sorts of stuff goes through your head.
Yeah. You're like,
they're mad at me, or
what's wrong?
Like yeah. So it is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice way to get people to a better place too, is because when you start that cycle of listening to people and then kind of talking to them from where they're at, then that's a think about if you got them in that place and you invite them to come do a sustainable event with you, are they going to be more or less likely to come with you? You know what I mean? If they feel like they've been heard and that you care about what their feelings and thoughts are on it, and you're willing to share that experience with them coming from where they're at, I mean, that's a great way to draw people in, is to make them feel like what they think and how they think about it matters, even if it's different than yours, And I see a lot of people who have very different views who joke about it and still go do stuff together, even though they're very different. If they're coming at it from two totally different ways, they can still see that bigger picture. And I think that's, those are the people who really, start to impact things. And I also was thinking about, like people like Jane Goodall, who, her work with the gorillas and all. She doesn't go try to drag people in to do it with her. She does her work, but look at the impact she has made. And Mother Teresa, and, make the list on and on of people who've done environmental things or who have done inventions that have changed the way that we do things environmentally. And they're just going out there and getting it done. And that can impact people too. So think about that the next time you get really frustrated. I can do it. I can go out there and make it happen on my own.
Yeah, I think your message about just modeling the behavior, that which is what you're essentially saying with that too, is really important because um, I know a lot of times, especially at work, and just as I've become more and more conscious of how I consume and the way that I live my life, I think to myself, I mean, it's just me and what difference am I making? I live alone. Nobody sees it. It doesn't even matter, except for to me. And then I'll have people that say things like, "Oh, I got this," and they'll be so proud to show me, like, "I got this thing that's like made of, compostable plastic," or "I got a metal straw," or whatever little
Yeah.
thing that they changed, or that they've started recycling. And they're like, "Oh, well, you've inspired me to do this," or because you talk about it all the time, I looked into this and it's really cool. So like,
Yeah.
you don't realize it, but you are making a difference in the
Yeah.
things that you do, and people notice, especially when it's something unique and different. They're kind of like, oh, that's neat. Let me look into that if they're,
Right.
open to that. And we had someone on our show at the very beginning, Stefan. He always said, living sustainably is not only good for the planet, it's just a more interesting way to live. And I think that's very appropriate, because why not do something because it's unique and different,
Yeah. Yeah.
things up
Exactly.
a little.
Yeah. 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 And I love what you just said about the impact that you have, because the other thing you don't know is if you impact that one person, how many people she went and told, and how many people
Exactly.
she impacted that you will never see
It's a
how
ripple
that
effect.
went through there. Yeah, that ripple effect of it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
My
I often
my
say, oh, go ahead.
uh, I was just gonna say my achievement so far is probably a coworker who told me a couple years ago, I don't recycle, I don't do any of that stuff. I think it's all silly. I admire you for doing it, but I'm just not going to do it. And then the other day, another coworker told me, Jennifer, you would have been so proud of her. She like refused to throw something away because she said Jennifer would get so mad if we didn't recycle these boxes. And she went out of her way, and I've even got her like opening the
Yeah.
compost bucket, which she said was disgusting and she was never going to
Yeah.
do.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
my proud
That's
moment.
right. Yeah. Pat on the back. Pat on the
Peer
back.
pressure.
Yeah.
It
Yay.
works.
Yay. Yeah. What were you going to say,
Um,
Jennifer?
I kind of like forgot, but
Oh, okay.
I think that that maybe just our common theme here is that we are all connected, and we understand that everything's interrelated. Like I often tell people to like just watch the movie Avatar and just look at it from like that environmental
Yeah.
perspective. It's hard not to, but yeah, I guess we're all kind of just talking about like taking care of ourselves, taking care of the planet. But I think, what I would want people to take away from this podcast most of all is just, look into proper forms of communication when we're trying to, get people to hear our side, because we have to hear their side as well. And we don't know how they were raised and what their belief systems are in regards to climate change or the environmental activism that we have
Right.
in
Right.
general. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Awesome. Well, ladies, if you don't have anything else on this, I think we'll move on to our green life hacks. Anybody have
sounds
anything to add
good.
before we
Sounds
jump
good.
over?
Sounds
So,
good.
who would like to go first? Jen, do you have something
I
ready?
know.
Okay.
I have to go grab it really quick. But so I also finally got around to putting a bunch of plants in my house. I've lived here for like 9 or 10 months, and I didn't have like a single living thing in here except for my animals. So I finally went and got a bunch of plants. So, and because I have a cat, I had to buy these like hanging planters. So,
Mhm.
I mean, those that you are watching, I'm going to turn this around and see. Can you guys see those?
Yeah. Oh, those
Oh,
are nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I like those.
They're
So I
wall
have
hanging.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, so I have like 10 of those around the house now. But I also just bought this today, which is a air plant.
Oh,
You
cute.
basically can't kill this thing. It like doesn't even
Just
have a
spray
root
it.
system
Yeah.
really. You just kind of like mist it with a little water thing. So I think where I'm having a hard time growing stuff, like, because my cat eats plants, I can't have anything like on tabletop, so I have it all hanging. But so there's certain areas of the house that don't really get sunlight and whatever. So I'm gonna do some of these
Nice.
air plants.
I've
So
been
again,
afraid to go vertical with my plants. I have a ton of plants everywhere, but I don't hang them because I don't know. I just worry they'll break or they'll fall or, I don't know.
yeah, I
I'm
don't know.
not
I
good
just
at
put a bunch of holes in the wall and put them on
hope for the
there. And
best.
I just take the whole thing off the wall and put it under the sink
Yeah.
to like water it, because it doesn't have like a drain thing either. So I'm being really careful of like
Oh,
not
yeah, how
putting
much?
too much water in because it can't drain. So
Then your
it's a bit
wall
of
will
an
start
experiment.
leaking.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I'm doing to make myself be more sustainable and more resilient and take care of me.
Bring nature into your home.
Nice. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Lynette,
Well,
what do you have for us?
well, I've got one, and I apologize. I don't have a one with me, so I can't. I can only verbally tell you how to do it. But one of the things, I told you about paper bags. Well, my other one is the Coke can, or the where you buy a 6-pack of something, and you've got that plastic thing, and the animals can get their heads stuck in the little round parts of it.
Yeah.
And so I've over the years I've always cut those up. I started by just tearing them, and tearing all the whole, so that all the little ones that are closed, just ripping them apart so that there's no holes for them to get their little head stuck in. But what I started doing is over the years is I found that if you take the where it's got the 3 and 3, and then there's a little middle piece that has some little holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a pair of scissors and you cut down the middle of the pack, where the little holes are down the middle, and then you fold it over so that the round holes, there's 3 and 3, and put them together, and then cut those, it goes twice as fast. So the next time you take home some of those 6-pack of things, just get a pair of scissors out and cut it straight down the middle, and then fold over the 3 parts and cut them, and you're done, and you can throw it in your recycle plastic.
Awesome.
I've seen a bunch of like alternatives to those nowadays. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of companies are kind of moving away from it, or you can even get like the stuff that comes in the cardboard.
Oh,
now,
yeah,
like
yeah. There's a lot of them, that are packing
I
it in
think I
cartons.
even saw one that was like edible for like sea creatures. Or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they dissolve.
Yeah. They've got a lot of compostable things now too, which I love that. Yeah, that's pretty neat.
That's awesome.
So that's mine.
Awesome. Yay, thank you.
Sure.
So mine it's pretty simple. I've been drinking out of this cool like glass water bottle that I actually got at Austin Creative Reuse a few months ago. So mine has just been trying to phase out disposable items and use more permanent things like water bottles, plates, silverware, even when I eat out. We've talked about that before, using your straws and taking Tupperware and everything. But yeah, trying to use more glass, metal, and not so much plastic, and getting used to just, even more phasing that out of my lifestyle diet. So,
yeah, Mountain Valley Water. I don't know if you're familiar with that brand. Mountain Valley Water has a great thing. They have the big containers that you can put on top of a little thing with a spigot. To get the water. A lot of those are plastic, but Mountain Valley Water has a glass one that's really nice, and you can get it. It's pretty inexpensive. Yeah.
It's interesting. I actually stayed at an Airbnb this past weekend, and she had that, and I would like the first thing I said was, "Is your water container glass?" She probably thought I was a weirdo.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like she had a
great.
stand with 3 glass ones and one on top, and
and you can just have your water right there. That's what I use at home, and you can go buy, and they give you you buy the glass, but then if you return it, you get money back. And so it ends up not being too expensive, overall. You have to put the initial investment in. But I just buy 2 of the glass things and then trade them out. And that keeps me in water all the time.
Yeah, just don't drop it, because.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a little heavy. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. Jen, where can we find you online? Are you online?
No, not anymore.
No,
Sorry.
completely hidden. So she's exclusive here to Sustainably Geeky.
Yes, you
Uh-oh.
have exclusive
All right.
rights to me.
Lynette, where can we find you online? And I know that you've written some articles, so kind of plug that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's a good place to, if you want to see some more about articles. I put all of my articles on there so that people can look at those. I write a kind of a monthly article for MPUG, which is a project management company, and I do it on soft skills and things like that. And then I do have a website that's expectations-reality.com. So
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Expectations-reality.com.
Yeah.
And of course, you can find me here on Sustainably Geeky, occasionally on Marginally Geeky and Epically Geeky, our parent channel, and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. You can also find the show on Facebook and Instagram at Sustainably Geeky, and on Twitter at Sustainably Geek, because the Y was one too many characters for us. And of course, the show can be found anywhere you stream podcasts. So please subscribe to us, share us with your friends, give us a 5-star rating, let us know what you think, and give us some topic ideas if you have them. Send us your suggestions. I know some of you like to share what you're doing and links to stories, and we love that. So keep sharing, and thank you for listening. Have a good night.
Bye.